Hey, today I sit down with Jeff Tiegs. He's a great human being. I practiced Jiu Jitsu with him. He's had an amazing life. He's got a great grasp of history and what makes history. He spends tons of time in the outdoors. He's raised a great family, and I was happy and honored to sit down with him and have a chat about the skin in the game that he brings to the world. Thanks for joining, and have a good listen. Bye.
Just some gifts.
Oh, thank you. I got a gift bag up there for you.
Oh.
You can take it with you when you're done, but it's a prop.
Yeah.
Right now.
Oh, good. Oh, yeah, it looks nice over there.
Yeah, it blends in. It's got all sorts of goodies in there. It's kind of our repair cream, massage cream. I use this stuff on my wrist after I cracked it. My wrist is doing awesome.
I like it.
Yeah, I'm blaming that. Spit Plus is for I have this thing. I put it on there, heals it right up. This is our newest product. I really like it. Performance is like an antiperspirant for hands and feet.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And then nice and de-wash.
Yeah, thank you, dude.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are cool.
These couches are made in Bend.
I like it.
Yeah. Cool. So basically, I do this podcast occasionally whenever I'm feeling motivated by the moment. And I call it Skin in the Game Podcast.
Yeah.
And I like to have people on that have skin in the game.
Yeah.
They have a passion that they're moving towards. They're kind of making a life transition to go all in on it, or thinking about going all in, or putting a lot of effort towards a project, whatever that project may be. And I try and keep the conversation away from specifics of training, which I don't, we might touch on some training a little bit, but there's a lot of podcasts. We're primarily a rock climbing company.
Yeah.
There's a lot of podcasts that are how do you rock climb better? How do I make my figures stronger?
Yeah.
And so I kind of try and stay away from that, because I think there's greater depth to people than just rock climbing, and I like people that have greater depth than just a singular focus.
Yeah.
I think that people who have a singular focus are great, and the success they find is awesome, but it's more interesting to me when there's multiple aspects of people.
Yeah, I agree.
So I like diving into that a little bit, and finding out a little bit more about you and who you are and where you came from, and where you're going, and the pursuit of skull games. And, we'll get there eventually. So Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Welcome to my home, and it was great having you. So I know a little bit about you. I know you were in the armed forces for some time.
Yeah.
You've talked about climbing mountains, running, and now your recent venture, Skull Games. And so if you can maybe just give a little synopsis of yourself, I guess let's start with I think the question of who you are isn't really what I'm looking for.
Yeah.
But what you've done quickly to lead up to it.
Yeah. Well, I think, coming over, I was thinking about a few things, and really what I landed on is problem solving. And I think we both love problem solving, the adventure of it. I mean, I think climbers love problem solving. That was what I loved about it.
Yeah.
It's how we migrated to Jiu Jitsu. I think it's why you see climbers migrate to Jiu Jitsu, chest, all these things. So I would say even from the start of entering the military, the problem I was confronted with coming out of high school was I didn't know what I wanted to do. It just wasn't clear. I didn't feel like anyone was really preparing me for anything. I went to a private school. I ran competitively in cross country and track, but I wasn't quite fast enough to recognize or understand there was opportunity for me. So I grew up in Wisconsin, and University of Wisconsin at the time, and still today, is one of the top powerhouse running schools in the country. So you had to be quite fast, and there happened to be 2 kids on my team that were faster than me. So we came in as freshmen. 3 of us all came in as freshmen as runners, and they were faster than me. They were the ones that were being recruited to Wisconsin. So my understanding of collegiate athletics was at the highest level. Okay. You know, fast forward a few years later, after I come out of the military, I end up finding a place to run in Division I. I mean, there's all sorts of levels of athleticism and you know that people can participate in. So the problem was, what are you going to do when you get out of high school? I wasn't sure what it was. A recruiter came to the school and he talked to me about joining the military and the reserve status. I knew what Special Forces was because of the movies, you know, the Vietnam movies, Apocalypse Now, and you know, and John Wayne's Green Berets, and I thought that would be a challenge, you know, an interesting mental challenge, physical challenge, something to do.
Did you work with like the ROTC before in high school, or
nothing?
Wow.
It was. I don't even remember how it happened. I think he was a recruiter at the school, and I talked to him, and then it was a friend of my dad's who was a recruiter. So I initially came in on a reserve contract to go into Special Forces, and I graduated high school in May of '87, and I think it was June or July. I was on my first airplane ride to Columbus, Georgia, you know, to go to basic, and shortly after I got on the ground there, I heard people talking about this other group of military special ops types called Rangers, which I'd never heard of those before. You know, now people have heard about Rangers. The word, especially with, you know, with a couple decades of war, you know, I think Special Forces and Rangers, and then ultimately Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, SEALs, all that is kind of not like people know about that. Back in the late 80s, we really didn't know about that. So,
was it more like in the 80s? Was it like more like the Dirty Dozen? There's like a few people.
Yeah.
And now it's grown to.
Yeah, and we just I think coming off the heels of Vietnam also, it wasn't really people weren't prideful about joining the military. You know, I mean, I think we were coming off of the scars of a draft army. You know, you were which I don't care for a draft army at all. I find it like I couldn't imagine having to lead men into combat that didn't want to be there. Like how difficult is that? So, you know, I think we're coming off of kind of that, hey, let's just kind of put all this behind us. There weren't things that were really staring us in the face. You know, the conflicts that we were dealing with was, you know, kind of things that were in Central America, the extension of the Cold War, and even then I wasn't understanding the advent of special operations, counterterrorism. So the problem, the problem that our country began to see was, do I have some leftover notes in there? Yeah. You just call that number, see what happens.
Okay.
I don't know what that is. You know, was the rise of terrorism. You know, people were hijacking aircraft and hijacking ships and kidnapping people. So our country was in a pivot to develop some of these specialized units, which I didn't realize at the time, you know, and Rangers were kind of a base element of that. So I pivoted to become a Ranger. I did 5 years as a Ranger and absolutely loved it. And I think it's the place where I grew up. You know, I went in at 17. My parents are wonderful people. They did a great job raising me and my brother and sister. But it was really that time in the Rangers where it solidified who I was. That was
17 to 22.
Exactly. You know,
Jeez.
That was where I was first introduced to climbing. You know, I think like some kids in the 70s, my first climbing experiences were pounding snow pickets into the top of a quarry with an old hemp rope and just kind of like
the original
rappelling off and climbing. Like I think back to those days, and we're lucky to be alive.
Did you know of like Fred Becky and Chenard back then?
Not at all. I was introduced to all of that in the military. I think we were just kids having a good time,
right?
And, you know, trying to have fun. And how do you climb this cliff? Oh well, you know. So, but in part of Rangers is you go to a Ranger school, which is a multi-month course, and it's multi-environmental, and one of the phases is mountain phase in Dahlonega, Georgia, which is at Mount Yonah, and they teach you how to climb. So that was really my first exposure to face climbing and traditional climbing and putting in pro and putting in fixed ropes and all of that.
Granite.
Yeah, you know, and I fell in love with it immediately, and then that became a pursuit of what climbing was at the time, and going back. So I think part of problem solving that a lot of people bypass is the reading side of it and the history. Where did we come from? Where did this come from? You know, so all those guys now, I'm continually enamored with what it was they pulled off, and the problems they solved with hobnail boots and hemp ropes and wool socks. You know what I mean? And the strap-on crampons.
The fortitude to just keep going at it.
And I think, you know, when I talk about growing up in the Rangers, one of the biggest compliments you could have is that guy's hard. Mm-hmm. Like that was hey, do you know Justin? I know Justin. That dude's hard. You know, and I think that was
nobody has ever said that.
No, but that was also what, in my experiences with climbing mountains and rock climbing, that to the being a hard man, that was a compliment. You know,
sure.
You know, you've I don't know if you know, you're a little younger than me. I don't know if people still say that.
Oh, definitely.
You know, but like that dude is hard. He can endure. You know, he can solve problems when they become complicated and wicked and more difficult. You know,
there's a English climbing video called Hard Grit, and it was just people climbing the top 3 English climbers at the time, just climbing the most scary, terrifying, poorly protected gritstone. And that was like the hard man rock climber of my youth.
Yeah. So that's what happened to me for 5 years. Was I was introduced to just the grit and being hard and enduring. And if you aren't solving the problem head on, or you know, you just keep working at it. Mm-hmm. So I loved it, and the next problem that arose was I was exposed to a unit called Delta Force that I'd never heard of before. You didn't even say that word back then. But I wasn't able to go in. I had, my eyes were not fixable to the level, and they wouldn't waive it. So everything else was waived. I went to scuba school and halo school and sniper school, and all those things have a standard of what your eye should be. But you just have a doctor say, oh, he'll be fine. You know, but they did not take that for Delta. So I became the kind of the bitter, angry ranger. You know, can't get my way, and decided
can't fix the problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it was an insurmountable problem. There's a story for another day on how I tried to lie, cheat, and steal my way through medical records that didn't work.
Seems like that's common. It seems like that maneuvering of medical records is pretty common for both ways, to stay out of the military and get what you want in the military.
Especially back in the 80s, because there weren't computers. You know what I mean? Like you handed something in as a hard copy, and you hoped that it didn't follow you, or something like that. So I ended up having a break in service. I was married at the time. To Jules, who we're still married with. I met Jules when we were 15.
Wow.
The other problem was we fell in love very, very young. We had a distant relationship when I was in the military, and she was living in Charlotte at the time. Her family had moved there. So the answer to that problem was get married young. We got married at 19, which is not really very common nowadays.
Yeah, not now.
But I would say I think it's something people should consider. If you're faithful and you're committed to that other person, and I think if you're able to wait with having kids, because having kids that's a whole nother introduction.
So you were in Rangers, right? So you were a Ranger for 2 years, and then you're like, I'm going to get married.
Yes.
Had they been sending you places yet? Or?
Yeah. We've been.
Knew what.
Yeah, she knew what she was in for, kind of. You know what I mean? I don't think she fully appreciated what she was in for. It was a peacetime. Military, so what our deployments were training. But unbeknownst to us, we were preparing for the invasion of Panama in December of 1989. I'd gone to Panama, I think, 3 times prior to that for training. Again, for training, you're a private. I think I was a corporal by the time the invasion of Panama came down, and that was Jules and my first experience on literally, hey, this is this is real. This isn't just playing. This is and
I'm not even sure what was the Panama thing about. Not all that.
so Manuel Noriega, he was a narco dictator. So he was creating kind of a narco state where he was bringing in drugs, and he was bringing in hooligans and just kind of building his own little empire. And he did work with the United States, but then he started to make kind of some movements over towards Russia and introducing some of their support. So America kind of said, stop that. But then I think we wanted to get rid of Noriega as the leader of Panama. The elections were rigged. I mean, he wasn't really an elected official. But then he started harassing some service members, and a service member got killed. And the U.S. I think it was George Senior that initiated that war. They used that as an excuse to come in and roust him. But that was, when you talk about training and preparing, it really was the first time where I saw it in action, and it's real and it worked, and I was very proud of what it was we were able to pull off. Return a sense of normalcy and patriotism. So Panama is one of the wars that I can go back to and stand there and go, all right, this worked. It's amazing. Like Panama City, you can go back, and it's all built over now, the places that we're at, but it's a thriving economy in Central America.
Yeah, people travel down there.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So that kind of
cool.
set the tone, I think, for our marriage, where Jules was understanding and accepting things like this would happen. That's where my kind of climbing bug was caught as well. That's when I started to travel down in the southeast and make trips out west and climb and up to the Dunks in the northeast. Just kind of the classical places. I remember reading about
the Musco.
The Musco. I'm drawing a blank right here. What we have just up the road.
Smith
Rocks. Like I'd heard of the fabled Smith Rock, but it wasn't really ever on the way.
That was the same for me. I was like, I knew of Smith Rock, and I knew of like the Monkey, and I moved here for culinary school, and then somebody was like, "You want to go to Smith Rock?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, let's go." And I was like, "Oh, this is here."
Smith Rock. Yeah,
I get it. Okay.
Yeah. So that's kind of, I became kind of a running bum and climbing bum. So like I said, I did find out there was a place for me to run. When the first university I went to was University of North Carolina in Wilmington.
Okay.
So Jules and I lived down in Savannah. We enjoyed the beach life. Her family wasn't far away. And then I ended up getting on scholarship to be able to run. And then I would kind of come out west to do some of the climbing. And on one of my trips out west to train, running wise and climb in Montana, we were up in Bozeman and Red Lodge, is where
all good spots.
Yeah, and I met the coach from Montana State, and ended up arranging the transfer. So that's where Jules and I moved out to Montana State.
Cool.
That was when I started to entertain coming back in the military. So they had an ROTC program there.
How old were you at that when you were in Montana?
So 1994, 95 to 97 is when I was there. So I guess I'm about 25 at the time. And I felt like the things that I had learned in the military were just kind of sitting. I'm seeing ROTC and they're teaching people to rappel, and the ranger competition, all these things where I'm like, no, this is how you do it. No, this is how you do it. So I found a passion to get back involved and help bring up kind of this next generation of cadets that were going to be going into the military. I was talking with friends and began to understand and recognize another problem that I'd identified early was we didn't really have a pipeline to assess and select and train special operations.
That's what I was going to ask. Did you see it as like an opportunity to like form a culture to bring people into it?
Exactly. So as I was studying psychology in college, and industrial psychology and organizational psychology, and recognizing we didn't have that in the military. It was kill or be killed. Like you just basically endured extreme levels of hazing for a period of time, and then you know what I mean. And I look back at that and I'm almost embarrassed because my ability to run and just do physical fitness stuff as a specialist or corporal. Like one of my jobs was to weed out guys we didn't want, make them quit, force them to quit, and I'm embarrassed about that now.
I think that was the general. I mean, I grew up. I was born in '79, so I grew up in the '80s, and my parents were super nice, kind people. But I think that was like the performance aspect of life in sports was like you just grind on people, you yell at them, you just berate them, and you just make their life miserable until they succeed.
Yes.
And it's interesting to see how like that ethos has changed of like you can actually just support people and build them up instead of break them down and have them build themselves.
Exactly. So I experimented that in real time. I was never that guy that felt comfortable like yelling at you until I really, even in my 5 years, I got out as a squad leader. It was building the team that I enjoyed, and I could see that impact. So recognizing that in university, I was like, hey, this is something that needs to happen. And around that same time, the military was looking at that, like how do we create a more enduring, capable Ranger, Special Forces guy, and then very specifically with Delta Force.
And stable.
Yes, so they had, this was a burgeoning program that they had. So I thought, okay, maybe I can be a kind of a plank holder in developing this.
That'd be an interesting case study to look at. Have a group of people, and I don't know how you would do this if it's ethical. Have a group of people that go through. I'm sure the epidemiological studies out there.
Yeah.
Have a group of people that have been just like hammered on and found success versus a more strategic and stable training program to find success, and like see how long success lasts and the life after success.
Yeah, I think so. There's two things that
because it works, yelling at people and bullying works sometimes.
Well, I think it comes back to this idea of the problem solving, and one of the simplest problems that you can be presented with is a physical thing. You finish this, you succeed. You don't finish it, you don't. And in the military, it was the physical fitness test. It was push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, 2-mile run, and there was a standard. And for many years, and I would argue up till today, it's probably still the most accurate indicator of someone who's going to be successful. But it doesn't have that much to do with the fitness. It's you recognizing what is it that you need, what gates do you need to get past to be successful. Like who really cares how many push-ups you can do or pull-ups or sit-ups? Right. But that person who recognizes, I want this, and I'll do whatever it takes to get there.
Isn't an obscene amount of push-ups and sit-ups?
No, it was 82 push-ups, 92 sit-ups, and 1150 something 2-mile run was the max. That was a perfect score. And then you go into those extended skills. So anyone that could do that was a by and large a solid soldier. I mean, there were a couple
high bar.
It's not bad, but it to this day it's one of the biggest tests that you can look at. It's not intelligence. It's not emotional intelligence. Like there's all these things that just get really squishy fast.
Yeah. But I mean, at a certain point of like physical exertion, there is an emotional intelligence you have to succeed at that.
Agreed.
Like self-regulation.
So I think there's a truth to that, but then I would also jump forward to, what makes Delta Force what it is they keep excruciating details and notes from day one when this unit stood up in 1979, 1980 to today. Like we're able to compare the candidate who's coming in from 2023 to that candidate who was there in 1980. And we can go into more detail about how they do that, but they know exactly what you talked about. This level of IQ, this level of physical ability, this level of cognition when it comes to eye and hand coordination and all these type of things. They know what this bell curve looks like to be a successful operator in Delta Force. Now, if you're one end of the bell curve, you know, the positive or negative end, you still can succeed, but they're watching you ever so closely. You know, so that's what intrigued me, is that unit has 100% figured out this is what the individual that's successful in our organization looks like.
Cool.
You know, and the one of the sayings that was there that I always thought was interesting is it's not the best guy, it's the right guy. You know, and we've likened that to even like a professional football team.
Yeah.
You know, the best quarterback on the planet can come into that team, but if it's not the way they run their defense, you know what I mean? So there's a fit factor as well. And I would say too, you know, in my particular journey, if I was a better runner, or if I would have been a better climber, or something that would have put me in that Olympic level, I wouldn't have been in the military. Like the guys in the military, many of them, especially in special ops, specifically in Delta, they're pretty high end. Like they're just sub-Olympic caliber athletes.
Yeah,
but
it's a pro sport.
Yeah. But if they were a little faster, a little stronger, they wouldn't be in that space. And then it's also this idea of you have to be able to climb. You have to be able to drive. You have to be able to fly when it comes to skydiving. You have to be able to dive and swim. So like you have to be. It's like the ultimate multi-sport athlete. You know, the special operations operator is the multi-sport athlete. And if you're super good at one thing, but you can't do another, you're of limited value.
Yeah.
You know.
Man, the swimming part of the military just seems like the most terrifying thing in the world. Because, like, you know, I'm pretty ignorant about it, but, you know, like falling out of the sky with a parachute is falling out of the sky with a parachute, and running's running. But, God, drowning is just awful.
Yeah, so I think there's keeping with this theme.
I guess bullets go slower underwater, though.
Yeah, but so the theme of problem solving, right? Like how do you assess and select an individual to join your ranks? And one of the ways, you have to put them under stress. Like that's a must. I mean, because people are very different when it comes to being put under pressure and stress.
Selfish.
So one of those modalities is lack of oxygen. It's underwater. So the modality that the SEAL teams use is the pressure is water. You're underwater. You're cold. You're tired. You're hungry, and you can't breathe. But clearly, a swimmer, a diver, somebody who has those particular skills, it's not a level playing field, right? I mean, even your lung capacity. Yeah. Now, I wouldn't throw it out completely, because just like when I went to dive school, you train for it. Like I practiced holding my breath. I practiced technique on how to swim, how to swim efficiently. So it still goes back to this idea. If you want something and you understand what the problem is and how you need to get there to reshape your mind, body, and spirit, then get there. But I think water is probably the fastest way to test people. But it's not necessarily
very definitive.
Yeah, but if you have more time, and that's what I think what Delta Force looks at, and even what Special Forces looks at, is something that takes weeks and months. So it's like a slow, steady level of pressure.
They want to see growth. Yeah,
and that you just have to endure, and it wears you down over time. It's not, hey, can you hold your breath underwater and tie these 5 knots? It's, hey, we're asking you to enter into this cold water and tie this knot every day for 80 days. You know what I mean? And it's like, but so it's a little kind of a different concept.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. And I think the other piece that you definitely went into, different from the SEAL teams, you're on this team and you can gain kind of strength and energy from the people around you. In Special Forces, they are looking at that as an aspect. There's a team aspect, because it's a 12-man team. That's the core of it. So you actually go through a series of events that you're assessed on how can you work with the team. But then there's a series of events where how you work alone and with little guidance and kind of loneliness and ambiguity. And that is largely what Delta Force does too. When you first go to the selection process for Delta Force, you're alone. Like you are not supposed to talk to anybody. You are not supposed to communicate. They give you your instructions and you go and do it, and you're alone, and and you never really know if you did it to satisfaction. You know what I mean? It's very, very ambiguous. So that's the initial.
Are you like alone in the woods?
You're alone in the woods. Yeah, you're alone in the woods carrying heavy equipment from point to point to point. You never know how far you're going to go that day, how fast they expect you to go. That's kind of the base piece of it, and then about a year's worth after that is now the teamwork, and they're training you how to be integrated into this team, because when you
that's wild to like have to basically create like a singular entity that could perform at the highest level, and how your brain has to like wrap itself and develop around being just you, and then like asking that person to then go work with the team which they don't necessarily trust or know, or
which I think is some of the things we see the weaknesses with the SEALs right now, where the SEALs have guys that are really kind of vocal and loud and writing books and making movies and beating their chests, and it because they aren't fully integrated into the subordination of that team. You know what I mean? Like Delta doesn't select guys that are very vocal. They really select quiet professionals that get the personal satisfaction. They don't have to announce it. So there's an initial part of that. But one of the things, if we do another podcast together, I think we're talking problem solving today. But the other one that blows me away is followership. Because as a leader, you don't have anything if people don't follow you. So it's this, and that's what I think people don't recognize. Also, the men and women that go into, again, I will say Delta Force is the pinnacle of special operations, just in military in general. They're incredible followers. Like they will subordinate themselves to a competent leader. They will subordinate themselves to the team.
Is that fluid within the group? Like, there's obviously one person in charge, but do you like say, oh, Sam, he's the best at B, and so it's like throughout. So one of the things. So you have the basic structure of in Delta Force is called a troop, and a troop has 3 teams, and almost every one of those troops, one of those teams is a climbing team. So they are expected to be up to speed on all of the state-of-the-art equipment, techniques. What's cool about the unit too is the budget is so big. Like if we wanted to have someone come in and train us in climbing, we would call Alex Honnold, or hey Alex, how, you were getting trained by the highest level guys. So these guys that were mountain teams or mobility teams or water teams or skydiving teams or recce teams, so you did have that built-in expertise, and that's what they did. So if you came into the unit and was on a climbing team, and as long as you wanted to stay on that climbing, you're a climber now for 20 years. That's pretty wild.
You know what I mean? And your kit was adjusted to that. Like our climbing teams, they didn't have what most people think of with the soldier. They didn't have all sorts of crap on their front because they're climbing. You know what I mean? They wore boots that were climbing.
What kind of objectives does like a climbing team have?
Most of the time it's urban. So it's urban climbing. Yeah. So it's that's a good question. It's really not. It's urban climbing.
The Chinese mountain ranges.
I mean, if you're doing some sort of movement and we're putting in fixed lines, but by and large we have mobility to do that, right? We would helicopter, motorcycles, however you need to get there, you get there. But really the climbing team is urban. So translating what it is that people are using on face climbing or protection or even aid climbing, because you're gaining the high ground.
Rigging, like rope rigging and anchors and.
I wouldn't say that. It really is gaining that high ground. So you're putting a 3 or 4 man team to gain the high ground. So like let's say we're going to hit an objective over here. Well, this team has to climb to this high building for Overwatch. You know what I mean? And maybe everyone in this building is not in play. You know what I mean? So it's like so it's surreptitious climbing.
Interesting.
Again, just moving around in that urban environment. I mean, we all carried fifi hooks and straps, so you could lower down off of the building, or you could go up to the second or third floor, and those guys kind of work all of that. I mean, yeah, they literally wore, I can't remember the name of the brand of the boots, but they look like climbing boots, and they had all the gear that you want. So you did have these specialty guys, but then in the middle of a fight, especially like a gunfight, everything just kind of moved with wherever the pressure was. So we used to liken our urban movement like water. Like you would flow like water. You'd find the path of least resistance and kind of surround and almost drown your enemy. Now that's kind of a Zen philosophy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's how it would look when you have a group of highly trained urban combat commandos. It's very hard to keep track of who's in charge and who's there, because there isn't. There's nobody in charge. You're all moving as a team. I think it would be, I don't know if I've seen any movies, maybe Zero Dark 30 a little bit when they showed some of that, but there's no talking, there's no communicating, like, because you're such a well-oiled team. It's almost like simul climbing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you're not really talking.
Yeah,
you're
just going.
You're simul climbing. You know what I mean? And that's kind of how it is.
Interesting.
Exponentially.
How much of like a mission did you ever just like? Obviously, it's a high stress, very serious pursuit that you're under right then. But did you ever like, from an outside view, like sneaking around a city, just kind of like that idea of flowing like water, just putting pressure on drowning, like the pursuit, if it wasn't so dangerous, people play like paintball and capture the flag all the time, and it's kind of like childish and fun.
Yeah.
Did that ever sneak into your mind, like, I can't believe I'm doing like this?
Oh
This
yeah.
is like
all the time. Yeah, all the time. And I think one of those.
It's a weird like juxtaposition to be in such like a serious pursuit, but also have like a childish game aspect to it.
Yeah, and that's how it is on an individual level. Like I mean, I was a professional. I mean, like it was what I dedicated my life to. So I'm not necessarily. I can't speak for everybody. But I do think too much of what people communicate of life at war and life in the military is the non-professional. It's that private recruit or that person that was drafted. It's like, no, I was a professional and I enjoyed what I was doing, and we had fun doing it, and we were laughing and joking in the middle of things that you wouldn't expect somebody to be laughing and joking, and yes, you came to terms with things like warfare is very isolated.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. Like
for us here it is.
But even in warfare, it's very isolated. Like you may be fighting in a particular alleyway. Well, the rest of the city's going about their business. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we've like halted gunfights because a guy goes by with his mule who's not in play. Wow. Or an old lady and her niece are walking by with some bread, or you know what I mean? It's only X number of people against X number of people. So there's all of this stuff that's happening around you.
Is it both sides that agree to that?
Yeah. It's just kind of a non. Again, you just kind of wait, or even that idea of, if we're going through a city, and let's say it's Baghdad, and there's thousands of people around, and we're passing hundreds and hundreds of houses, but we're going to one. We're going to one house. Well, any of those houses we pass, someone can shoot at us. Any of those houses we pass, somebody can throw a grenade out at us, and you just accept that that's the possibility. You know what I mean? So there's so much that's out of play. But this was kind of what, I don't know if you were sitting there when I was talking to Coach the other day about the paintball type stuff.
No.
The first time I played paintball, there's a serious level of lack of realism because the stakes aren't high.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like we're walking through a city and passing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people, and that person isn't going to shoot at me because the repercussions are high. As soon as you shoot at me, now you get our attention. I don't know who you are. I don't care who you are. You just shot at me. You are now a combatant, and you're going to feel the wrath of this specialty group of men that are there not for you. You know what I mean? So like in paintball, it's kind of a free for all. You know, so like that's one of those things I think people don't realize is you're walking through markets, you're walking through cities, and you leave them alone, and they leave you alone. And when it comes time to fight, that it's very limited. And then if you're doing it right, you're setting the conditions to where that person doesn't want to fight, where they already recognize that they don't have the upper hand. And that's where that climbing team comes in. That's a critical part, is if you can control their ability to escape and force them to get kind of smoked out on the ground, that's a really solid tactic.
It's such a complicated, I mean, obviously it's the most complicated situation there is in one's life. And it's interesting to like think about what I've done, just rock climbing or skiing, things that I've been like, I wonder if I could ski down that.
Yeah.
And just like preparing myself and building myself up to be able to manage the accomplishment. And it's just that aspect of war is so much more in depth that it's like kind of hard to fathom.
But it's very, very similar. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
there are
it's problem solving and risk mitigation. How do you mitigate these risks? You know, and that's what you're spending.
Yeah.
You know, your whole time is how do you stack the deck that you are successful and you survive this.
That is what outdoor pursuits I think are for many people, is just like putting yourself in a situation where it could go wrong, have some consequences, but like keep it safe.
And I think, you know, you and I talked about this, I think the other day, you know, because, you know, we with working in counter trafficking now and blending this with some of these athletic pursuits, it's trying to find these ways to communicate with folks. So being a soldier, being a counter trafficking professional, being a jiu-jitsu athlete, being a climber, there's one of the things that's similar in addition to the problem solving is almost like this sub-identity. You know, like when you think back of what you were able to do in the climbing world, like that's you, but that's you in a very finite set of conditions. Like you can't maintain that level of intensity and focus and kind of pushing on the edge for long. You know, mountaineering is a perfect example. Like the ability to endure the temperatures and the altitude and all, like you have to come back from that. You know, you can't stay there.
You need to reset.
Yeah, and that's what I like about that's what warfare was like. You know, and you know, as you were building a target packet and getting ready to go out, that ritual of putting on all of your equipment. You know, watching the climbing guys get into their climbing gear. You know, they're putting on an actual. You know, I didn't wear an actual harness with straps, but all of our belts. You know what I mean? You know, so like even watching people, you know, you're turning into something just a little bit different and a little bit more focused. And that's what I like about climbing. When you approach the base of that rock, you're becoming a different animal. You're becoming comfortable at these heights and comfortable with these risks, and you're trusting your gear and you're trusting the people you're climbing with. You know, in jiu-jitsu, you put that gi on. And I think that's part of why I like gi jiu-jitsu more than no gi. You know, because the no gi jiu-jitsu, what you put spats on, you put on a tight shirt,
tights.
You know, but I'm just used to, you know, the gi where you're putting on a jacket and you're putting on a belt and you're becoming this person who's ready to go to battle in a safe environment and endure.
It's similar between like sport climbing and bouldering or trad climbing. Like trad climbing, you racking up all your gear, put on your shoes, you tie in, and you're like, we're bouldering, you just like put on your shoes and you chit chat.
Yeah.
Like, oh, here we go.
Yeah. And I always loved the traditional climbing. You know, even I think they call it on-sighting, where even not having the beta, like you show up and you know, I love I was never a good correct climber, but finding the weakness of the rock, and you're going from bottom to top, and you're placing the pro. Like I loved that side of it.
Yeah, for sure. Problem solving. So, with everything you've learned through climbing and jumping out of airplanes and your entire military experience, team building, you said, did you get a degree in psychology?
So I got a bachelor's degree in psychology, and then in the military, around the time of a major. So when I came back in the military, I was a commissioned officer as a lieutenant, and around the time you're a major, you can go get your master's. And I ended up getting a master's in strategic studies and foreign relations. I think it was from the Naval War College, but basically strategy and design is what I got my master's in. Yeah.
So you're bringing that into your current effort of skull games.
Yeah.
Counter trafficking is the best way to explain it.
I think so.
When you're bringing people on board to help with the effort, are you approaching it similar to how the military would bring people in to help, or are you willing to take anybody, or are you able to like take anybody and then mold them into what you need?
Yeah. So a couple different answers to that one. So what we've created is an organization. It's Skull Games. Skull Games Incorporated is the organization, and that's our core group of people. And I'm kind of cheating a little bit because those people were pulling from this community. You know what I mean? So it's like they've already been through all these gates. You know what I mean? Almost everyone we're working with is a vet, and many of them are coming out of these special operations. So I know the journey that they've been on. So really, it's integrating them into the team. We're jumping straight to that. You know,
cool. When
it comes to the volunteer force, and we call that the Skull Games Task Force, which is this idea of, hey, we've tried to democratize this where anybody can get involved and understand this more. There's a few simple gates that we have, you know, background checks and some training and education and that type of thing. But by and large, a lot of it's the OJT, you know, on the job training. Okay. You know, and the other thing that I really like that I've been doing since I got out too is just hiring people in as on a 1099 contractor basis. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, you know, by the time you're a full-fledged employee with us, you've gone through weeks, months, if not years of already us looking at you and you know, us watching how you solve problems. Cool. And all that. Yeah. So I think, and none of this was by accident. You know, one of the decisions to build a counter-trafficking organization was based upon trying to find occupations that continue to inspire the people that I worked with in the past. So
I was gonna ask. I was like, that's a really wild pursuit to like.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
I'm gonna like go after predators.
Yeah.
Which, you know, it makes sense, and somebody's got to do it. And it's a very like, I don't know if wholesome's the word, but it's a very like righteous thing. To do.
I'm not going to downplay the righteousness of it, but it's much more selfish and self-centered than that also. You know, so we, just like we started this discussion, I'm getting out of high school and I'm like, who am I? Like, what is it I do? What is it that interests me? Well, that same thing happened to me in 2015 when it was time to leave the military. It's like, who am I? Like, what do I like to do? What am I good at? And like hunting people. Like that's what I do. I mean, that's, you know, and I've perfected that, you know, on integrating the technology of collecting intelligence and analyzing that and predictability and game, you know, all these things, like it all came together. And it's like, okay, well, now I just need an enemy. You know what I mean? Like I've got the good guys. Who are the bad guys?
So you didn't approach it from like somewhere along the line you saw like atrocities and you're like, God, somebody's got to do something about this. You approached it from like, I have these skills, what can I apply them to?
Both.
Yep.
So
Okay.
the first time I had ever even heard of trafficking and like that commercial sexual abuse was in Panama
Okay.
with Noriega. Like that guy was so powerful, he had his little sex slaves of various ages.
Wow.
You know what I mean? And that and you see that, you know, you're confronted with it, but you dismiss it as, well, that's a one-off. That guy's a drug-addled loony. You know what I mean? And then as you're travels through the world, you see these markets, right? Like in the Far East or in Central America, these red light districts where they're selling women and they're selling children. But you didn't really understand it as an economy. You know, when Al Qaeda and ISIS started enslaving women because they felt that was okay with the way they were interpreting Islam, and that it was kind of the spoils of war. Now I'm beginning to see this market that's out there. So I saw trafficking and I saw the kind of sexual slavery of women and children through my life, but I really dismissed it as these one-offs and kind of a foreign issue. And then I really do feel like God laid it on my heart over time. You know, like I'd pass a billboard or something, or I'd see something in passing, and it would really, like, I would feel it, like, ooh, like what? Mm-hmm. So I started. I think that really kind of this slow whisper in my mind and heart came first, and I started to dig into the crime and the criminals, and I didn't know, like, there is an entire economy of selling women and children for sex.
Just like, the word of economy, kind of like points towards organization and profit and structure.
Yeah, versus trafficking. I mean, like, I think, you know, we say sex trafficking, but it's kind of, no, there's an underground commercial sex economy. And when I say underground, it's more like under this table. It ain't far. You know what I mean? It's not, it's on the open internet. You know, so when I really began to understand the level of this exploitation and abuse, and looked around like, who's doing something? Surely somebody's doing something. And then, you know, the finger kind of came back to me of like, well, hey man, like you've got the skills, you've got the understanding, you can build a team to really tackle this. And then, like I said earlier, building something for my mates. You know, we had talked about, we started doing a pretty good job of assessing and selecting and training the people that we wanted in these organizations. What we did a really poor job was then seeing them out. You know, it was almost literally, you know, don't let the door kick you in the ass on your way out. It really was just an oversight, you know, and I think that the wear and tear of the wars on these people, you know, these men and women, they were in sustained combat for a couple decades. I mean, it has never happened before. Like we've never had, and I don't think in the history of warfare we've ever had a population that would go and come back and go and come back, and, you know, like I would do mostly 3 to 6 month rotations, and then I'd come home, and then I'd go, and then I'd come home, and that changing of worlds and changing of my personality and my psyche is really hard. And we didn't, you know, I mean, I could be on a target one day in a serious gunfight and be home 12 hours later, or vice versa. I could kiss my boys goodbye, get on an aircraft, land in Iraq or Afghanistan, and be in a gunfight 12 hours later. So like this transition of back and forth from a warrior to a father, from a warrior to a citizen, from a warrior to a husband, like we didn't really get our arms around that, and we're just now beginning to recognize, with the levels of suicide and depression and things that are happening to our soldiers. So
that almost seems like an impossible thing to, as a group, get around. You know, like what a for humans, like what an artificial like thing to be able to put us in. You know, like usually historically you had to like walk. Prepare.
Or get on a ship that took 2 months.
Just you had time to prepare and switch over.
And and then you were welcomed home and integrated into society.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that, I think
welcome.
that's one of the things from the Vietnam War that was so hurtful, was these men and women were not prepared adequately, and then it was the year-long tour of various levels of hell that they went through, and then they're coming home certainly not welcomed as heroes. You know what I mean? You know, not everyone was called a baby killer and spit on. I mean, I have that experience. I've been called a baby killer. I've been spit on. Like I can appreciate what some of these Vietnam veterans had gone through. Yet there was such an overwhelming level of support from America that definitely outweighed that. So I do think it's a very difficult expectation, but the least we can do is talk about it, try to solve that problem, and mitigate that risk. You know what I mean? And I think that's, you know, and somehow, some way, I was able to do that with my wife and family. I mean, my wife carried the heavy load of raising our boys. You know, 2 boys, and you know one of them very well, and he's an absolutely beautiful, amazing man. You know, and my wife, she spent his entire life dedicated to him because I was in and out of it. You know, so it's only now that I'm able to reap some of the rewards and breathe back into Aaron, in that new relationship. So somebody, it comes at a cost. There's no question. And even things on discussing how to deal with it. I'm going to jump around a little bit, but because one of the things that I thought, if for your listeners, if Maria Coffey's book, Where the Mountain Casts Its Shadow, or In the Shadow of the Mountain, I can't remember. In the Shadow of the Mountain. Okay. So Maria lost her fiance in the high country, and she goes back and she interviews a bunch of these survivors who had lost their spouses. And so, you know, there's a handful of women that died, and she's talking to husbands and children, but many of them are men. And to me, it was a groundbreaking book to read, because I had sought this out. I had sought out how are these men and women dealing with coming back from war and the banality of war. Like, dude, I knew fairly early on Afghanistan was not winnable. You know, Iraq was not winnable. Yet I continued to go back to those wars, just like the people in the death zone. How do you continue to go back and like push the envelope and climb those high mountains when the risks start to like stack up? You don't.
Yeah. Did you start taking solace in like successful objective, even though the greater ethos was not achievable?
Yes. Really, it was taking monsters off the planet. Like these the ability, that the surgical ability that we had with Special Forces and Delta to take one human. Like, we could go into a city and take one monster and take him off the planet without harming anyone else or dropping any bombs, or like the surgical level. And then also, especially in Afghanistan, I came to terms with the fact that the team that I had and the way that we were resourced, my job wasn't even as much as capturing and killing the enemy, the Taliban. It was protecting those Marines and sailors and airmen and other army guys that were living in Afghanistan. You know, I flew around and fought. So you switched kind of what it was your focus was on. But back with the Maria Coffey book, I came to terms with the fact that that's who I am. And we don't have a good word for it. You know, we say operator. To me, commando is probably the best. You know, people like that's who I am. You know, I'm not a high mountain alpinist. I dabbled in it, but it's not who I am. It's not my identity. And I think those men and women that go to the high places, they come to terms with the fact that that's who they are.
Yeah.
And they will sacrifice everything for it. They're a high altitude alpinist, you know. And that book helped me recognize, oh, I'm a high risk commando, and I will sacrifice everything for it. And you just have to come to that reality. You know what I mean? And then the people that love you in part of that, or in spite of that. You know, I think one of the things that my wife is attracted to me, and back then, even when we were 18 years old, was I'm a high risk commando. Like that interests her. That yet what she had to sacrifice to maintain that relationship. So I think people have to come to terms
that's the
with it.
thing that made you the person.
Right.
That's it's so wild in relationships when somebody falls in love with a person who does something to an exceptional level or whatever, to the level that makes them enjoy the pursuit and shapes them as a human, whatever level that is, and then wants to change them.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
and being true to yourself.
I'll be a different person. You're not gonna like that person.
Being true to yourself, So so that a high risk commando has a time limit, right? Like your literally your body wears out, just like a high altitude alpinist. You're not doing that. Your body wears out.
Yeah.
So that is that reinvention of who am I, and that's where I'm a defender and I'm a protector, and even when you unravel this high risk commando, that's really what I was. I was a defender and I was a protector. I was defending from the abuses of Al Qaeda and ISIS and the Taliban. I was protecting these communities that wanted a different life for themselves. Those were the things that really made me tick. The high risk commando was means to do it. And now counter trafficker is the means to be a protector and defender.
Yeah. So you can bring your fellow special forces friends or companions into this. That seems like not a more obvious path. But for the general public, rock climbers, jiu-jitsu athletes, skiers, mountain climbers, me personally, I think it's something that I never thought of or thought about until meeting you.
Yeah.
And then talking with you and seeing the prevalence of it, and just I don't know, whenever I talk about anything, I'm terrible at math, but I always like to talk about numbers.
Yeah.
I don't know why that is, but it's just like daunting and overwhelming when we talk about the numbers. So like getting other people to be aware, that's usually the first part of solving a problem, is like becoming aware of the problem.
Yeah.
How do you see the general public working to like stamp this out, or at least put a dent in it, slow it down?
Yeah. So I'm going to use a couple of terms here, and one of those is intentionality, and the other one is empowerment. So when I'm talking about trafficking, and we're talking about the commercial sex industry, that is kind of the pinnacle of the abuse and the exploitation. But it sits on all these other levels of neglect. You know what I mean? We are doing a very, very poor job of building confidence in our young people. I specifically girls and women, like empowering them. That's why one of the things you and I love about jiu-jitsu. I mean, I have to fight off tears when we go to these tournaments and you see the girls from Clark's competing. I get goosebumps thinking about it because I know she's going to be fine. There is not a boy out there that's going to exploit her and degrade her, because she's building this level of invincibility and confidence and empowerment through this sport. And I think rock climbing can do the same thing.
It definitely does. I see a lot of women who, I think the conversation's out there a lot, especially recently. It's growing that there's women who have been in abusive relationships or relationships where they lack confidence, and then they start rock climbing, and then all of a sudden I think part of it is they're around other people who are succeeding and confident and secure with themselves and the world and the people they surround themselves. And so jiu-jitsu is like this as well. You start to get to see models of success and confidence, and then you start modeling yourself. You start forming yourself around that confidence, and then with rock climbing, there's a lot of introspection. you look at where you are, and this of course happens with guys too. I definitely went through introspection, and you start kind of rebuilding yourself and creating a new group of people that you're around, and so maybe that last group wasn't that healthy. So I don't know where I was going.
No, I agree with you, and it's and helping people that have suffered traumas and abuse recognize that was yesterday, today is today, and I can continue to reinvent myself. And I think that the climber community is a place for that. I mean, there's a lot of independent people there. There's a lot of, I think, introverts that come to climbing, and yet, you know, other than, I mean, even bouldering, you need a partner. But I mean, definitely when you're climbing with a partner, like there's a trust there that has to build, and a reinventing owning your own body. You know, and I think that was one of the things that I thought was so beautiful that Aaron talked about when we were talking about Skull Games and what Jiu Jitsu can do, is when people are robbed of their body. Again, I'm talking predominantly women, but again, a boy or a young man who's sexually abused or physically abused, that like part of their body's taken away, part of their ownership, you know, part of their identity is taken away. Now when that happens repeatedly with these trafficking victims, you know, or someone who's in an abusive relationship, like they lose control and identity. They look down at themselves and they don't even know who they are, and they don't feel like they own their body. So I think climbing is a pursuit that you have to know your body. You have to understand your body, its strengths and its weaknesses, its limitations and its constraints. You know, so you begin to own your own body again. And I think that is a critical part of then beginning to own your mind. You know, you can go to counseling, you can go to therapy, you can talk about what has happened to you, but your body constantly fights against you. You know, there's a book out there, the body keeps the score. You know what I mean? Which is this idea of, things can happen to you and you can learn how to compartmentalize those, but your body keeps the score.
That's a really thorough sentence.
Yeah.
That's like, that's really good.
And rock climbing does that. Rock climbing has to lay your score on the table, and you've got to work through it. You know, Jiu-Jitsu does that. So going back to your question, you know, we have tried to democratize what it is we do, help people understand more about counter trafficking, and trying to create a space that people want to participate in these task force events. But really, I would go back to people looking at what's happening in their own homes and their own communities, and being intentional about building the confidence and self-esteem of our young people, boys and girls. I mean, part of the abuses that boys and men are laying on women is because they don't know themselves. They don't know who they are. They don't know what their role is. They're not confident in their own bodies. So jiu-jitsu and climbing, to me, are two of the greatest pursuits that build that inside people. But it has to be intentional.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you can't, and this is like fatherhood too. You know, like you can go to a baseball game with your kid and not be present, or you can be intentional. Like you're gonna sit in that baseball game and you're gonna share things with your boy. You know, like anything can be a building.
Yeah.
You know, something that builds a relationship. But the more intentional you are about that, and because of the requirement to be intentional, you and I joke about, you know, if you're not intentional in jiu-jitsu, you're going to go to sleep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Someone's going to break an arm or a leg. You know, so it's already built in intentional. Same with rock climbing. You have to be intentional. You have to be present. So to take that and just point it a little bit more into building people's confidence, empowerment.
Yeah. And the teaching of intent isn't really there.
I agree.
Teaching and education is mostly like result based.
Yeah.
And it's not like they're not teaching the skills in order to get the result. They just want the result.
Yeah.
So it's like, do whatever you want to get there.
Yeah.
But if you learn just like intent, you get it a lot.
And to me, that is, you know, I'm on the backside. I mean, I'm 54. I'm
It's over.
I planted my flag on backside. I don't think I'm going to live to 108. So I'm already on that backside, you know. And those things. It is intentionality is one of those things that I really want to share with people. Be intentional, you know. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but climbing and jiu-jitsu, like it's built in. You made that move. You know, you conquered this boulder, you conquered this face. Like there's already a built-in intentionality, you know, something you couldn't do before. Jiu-jitsu, sometimes when you and I roll, some days it's just survive, right? I survived 7 minutes, I survived 5 minutes. I got, you know, like there's all these micro things that you can build upon with confidence and self-esteem, and people recognizing and understanding that the opposite is happening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Thousands of times a day, we're telling our young girls, you're not pretty enough, you're not sexy enough, you need to change your hair, you need to change your eyebrows, you need to do this, you need to do that. You know what I mean? It's like some of that is subliminal and some of that is intentional. Mm-hmm. And of course, none of us have the patience for that intentionality, breaking somebody down. But
yeah, it's hard.
When you're honest about what we say in society, it's happening all the time. Mm-hmm. You know, you're judged by how you look. You're judged by how, you know. No. We need to defray all that nonsense with
what you've done.
Yeah.
With Skull Games, when you, I don't know if you use liberate or
recover is what we do. Yeah.
When you recover these young women, or is there infrastructure to help them rebuild?
Yeah. So it's not as big as we want in the United States. So when we look at what we do within Skull Games, we have a kind of a simple saying. We identify victims that are being sexually exploited. We interrupt that cycle of abuse. We assist in restoring them with mind, body, and spirit. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is the prevention and protection efforts so that it doesn't happen again. Now, the restoration side of it is probably the least amount of direct effort that we put into it, because there are other groups that do this. You know what I mean? So we want to partner with organizations that do it, the counselors, the safe houses, the occupational therapy, all these types of things that are available. So when we are involved with recovering a victim out of the life, we want to have somebody on the backside that can walk alongside her and her family and ensure that her healing becomes restorative. Because the backsliding is terrible. You know, again, you're compounding this sexual abuse with drug addiction and alcohol addiction and all sorts of unhealthy coping mechanisms that you've built because of this thing that you're enduring. So it's a very, very complicated restoration process. One of the things that we offer on the back end is after these women have exited the life and on a path of recovery, that's where we want to introduce them to jiu-jitsu to get that final healing, that those pieces in your body that you don't even realize. These defense seminars and things that we do, like grabbing, when we do grip fighting, I've met women that are 10, 15 years out of the life, and I show them grip fighting, and I grab a wrist, and they collapse. Where, they don't realize they even have these scabs and these scars and this tissue, that the body keeps the score. So now you're teaching them how to break out of that and kind of reinvent themselves. And so we do that at a very physical level with jiu-jitsu, and then we also introduce these women that we call survivors that come out, so victim to survivor. The next term people often use is the thriver. So you're a victim, you become a survivor, then you begin to thrive. And somewhere in that space, we want to offer the option to become a hunter as well. So these women that live this life, they live this life of abuse. They live the life of the product that was being sold. They are now coming back and offering women that were in their same position an opportunity to freedom and to lay some justice down on these predators. And as sophisticated as our technology is, the understanding how to use facial recognition and machine learning and all, artificial intelligence. All that's great, but it's the human that understands how to leverage all that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you take that survivor hunter, which she's able to see and identify things that a computer can't.
Mm-hmm.
She can look, she can just see because she survived it. There's that saying that survivors know survivors, victims know victims, because I think it's much more of a chemical level. Like even the chemicals your body exudes is something that you learn to live with. But the way someone carries their head, or the way that they look or glance around the room, like you begin to identify. I learned that as a soldier. Like I could go onto a target, and because of my life depended on it, I could see a guy and recognize indicators and the way he moved or looked, that I was like, oh, he's bad, he's okay. You know what I mean? So that's what these victims understand and recognize also. So in addition to all of our data that we're looking at and all these predators and victims, they're seeing things that we would never see, and to have one of them say, that they appreciate this opportunity and just wish somebody would have been looking for them.
Mm.
Like when we're not going to find everybody, and then when we do find them, it might not be time, and they might not be ready to break away. They might have too much, a predator might have too much control.
Yeah.
But just the mere fact that we do care, we are looking for you. We will find you eventually. We will offer you a new life. Like that's enough to live. This goes back to the venture, right? Like one person to say, to appreciate the sacrifices you made or understand where you came from. So that's the other intangible of this is I like to talk about skull games and what it is we're doing, and one of those pieces of intentionality is for that girl or boy or woman who's trapped right now, we're praying for you.
Mm-hmm.
We care for you. We're looking for you, and by God, we're going to come for you. And just keep fighting.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing everything you do. I think that's a great place to end that. That was perfect. Cool.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, I appreciate it.